Hi, everybody. FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos here for ChessLecture.com. And we had a suggestion as the series on the World Champions came to a close, and that was to spend some time discussing some of the people who almost became world champions. Well, I don't know if I'll do a whole straight series on them, but certainly from time to time I think they're worth having a look at. So today and in the next video, I will look at a couple of games by David Bronstein, one of the best players in the middle of the 20th century, a player who very nearly became world champion in 1951. So he drew a famous match with Mikhail Botvinnik. He was even leading with 2 games to go, but lost in the final black game of the match. And so that allowed Botvinnik to catch him, and they drew the last game, and it ended in a tie, which meant in those days that the match simply ended with the champion keeping his crown. And there have been a number of matches like that. Botvinnik, in fact, did it twice in a row, well, 2 consecutive times. First against Bronstein, then against Smyslov. I'm trying to think who else. Well, Kramnik against Leko was another example, and I believe there's one other one that's not springing to mind at this point. But anyway, at least 3 times, and then a couple of other matches have gone to tiebreak since then, famously Kramnik Topalov and Anand Gelfand last year. Anyway, about Bronstein. He was born in 1923 or 4, I forget which offhand at this moment, and just died a few years ago in the 2000s, late 2000s. Very, very creative player. So, not exactly like a Mikhail Tal, but because in Tal's case, was much more trying to attack. Bronstein wasn't necessarily trying to attack, but creating complications, absolutely. Now, he could play any kind of game, but in this week's show, we're going to see really his creativity and display in an attacking context. All right, well, his opponent was Gavriil Veresov, an IM, and this was played in Moscow in 1960. Let's go ahead and jump in and have a look. Veresov, of course, is best known for an opening, d4, d5, knight c3. Sometimes that can turn into a black Redeemer gambit if white plays e4 shortly thereafter. Anyway, it's kind of a sideline, but it has its followers, to be sure. All right, well, we don't get it in this game because Bronstein, for one thing, plays e6 on move 1. Not something he always did, but he was a fan of the French. And in general, Bronstein had a very, very diverse opening repertoire. I mean, he could play anything with either color. And that was part of what made him such a fascinating player to watch. By the way, he was also a fantastic author. Certainly his book on the 1953 Candidates Tournament, Zurich 1953, is a classic, praised by virtually everyone, and rightly so. He also wrote a number of other very good books. 200 Open Games is kind of a fun book. It's not a heavy-duty analytical work, but it's a very nice introduction to the open games. And all the games are his games. A lot of losses and draws in there, so it's not that it's his 200 best games in 1E4, E5 openings. Also, more recently, The Sorcerer's Apprentice is an excellent book. And there was one last book of his that came out a little before his death called something like Secret Notes, and that's also pretty good. And he did a couple of other books, one on the King's Indian and one called something like The Modern Chess Self-Tutor. Those books are okay, but the first 3 that I mentioned I think are really the best. Sorcerer's Apprentice, Zurich 53, and the 200 Open Games book. At any rate, let's go ahead and jump back into this, but again, let me wholeheartedly commend to you his games and his literary works. All right, Veresov played c4, and here Bronstein plays, or keeps it unusual. He plays bishop to b4 check. This is the Indian, although it can often transpose to the Bogo-Indian, which in fact happens in this game. So bishop d2, a5, knight f3, knight f6, and now it's a Bogo. Okay, the usual move here is g3. But it's not the only way to play. And in fact, g3 occurs a few moves later on. So knight to c3. And here, black is more or less committed to taking on c3. White white you can at least expect to play a3 sooner or later. So black will take. And then one crucial square will be the e4 square. And this is true of many Queen's Indian, Bogo-Indian, even Nimzo-Indian kinds of positions. So b6 is in fact most common here, and one reason why white generally plays g3 as quickly as possible. But Bronstein goes for a different plan in this game. He plays d6, and the idea is to play e5 soon. Okay, queen c2, knight c6, and then g3. Here, in fact, a3 is considered to be, I think, the most accurate move. Here, the players will exchange, and then queen e7, again, in support of e5. So e4, e5, d5, knight to b8, and white has played a variety of moves here, but c5, I think, is considered to be the most incisive, doing so before black plays knight to d7 or in some other way impedes the c4, c5 advance. So white probably has a slight edge at this point. Okay, well, let's get back to the game, since this didn't happen. Veresov instead played g3. Here, there aren't too many games from this position, but generally the ones that have reached here have continued either with e5 right now, which is what happened in our game, or with black first castling, and after bishop to g2, then playing e5. Well, as I said, played it straight away. Takes, takes, and here white should play rook to d1, and then follow up with either a3 or knight to d5, especially if black plays queen to e7 here to get off the d file. So, yeah, I don't know that I would recommend that as a pawn sacrifice, but queen to e7 is fairly likely or plausible at this point, and then knight to d5 is an option. Well, that's, as I said, what white should have played. What he did play was similar, but crucially different. So, of course, castling queenside puts the rook on the d file. And further, it looks useful in the sense that now, after something like queen to e7, bishop to g5, then knight to d5 is threatened, and there's no pin on the knight. Or, in fact, actually after queen to e7, maybe knight to d5 straight away. Well, here Bronstein springs into action. The drawback of castling queenside, although it doesn't really look like it should be that serious, is that black does have some attacking prospects over on the queen side. Built on using this pawn on a5. The pawn on a5 by itself isn't sufficient to generate some kind of mating attack, but it helps. All right, well, let's see. Black plays bishop takes c3. And this might seem surprising at first in that it gives away a tempo, but again, black does not want to allow knight to d5, so he takes straight away. Okay, bishop c3, attacking the queen and the e5 pawn, so queen e7, bishop to g2. And here, black understandably played knight to b4, but it looks as if castling right away would be a little bit more accurate. And we'll see the reason in a moment. Bronstein played knight to b4, queen a4 check, bishop to d7, and here white could have stayed alive with bishop takes b4, exploiting the fact that the rook on a8 is unprotected. So there's no a takes b4 here because the rook would drop. Black would have to play bishop a4, bishop b7,